Alright folks, yes, it's more Total War Warhammer 2 stuff. I know a lot of you don't watch this channel for Total War Warhammer, but I love the game, so you're gonna have to put up with it, I guess. The Prophet and the Warlock patch notes for the Doomsayer update have now dropped. And they're actually very interesting. So these are the notes for the automatic update that arrives alongside the Lord pack. Not technically the DLC itself. The DLC has, Ikit Claw, 10-1, the new units for the Lizardmen and the Skaven, all of that stuff, but the Doomsayer update contains all kinds of changes to how the game works that affect everybody regardless of whether they purchase the DLC. So we can see over here on this little thingy here. You got the Tic-Tac-Toe free LC with all of that stuff, unique quest chain, unique mount, new right, new map, unique special items, all skink heroes mounted by default for his faction. That's actually really cool. Tic-Tac-Toe looks like he's going to be interesting. I'm not sure how powerful he's really going to be, but it's nice to have that kind of flyer focus, which is something that we haven't really had before in the game. It is, I think, a little odd that it's coming for the Lizardmen, who don't actually have a whole lot of flying units. Of course, the Ripperdactyls are going to be the most powerful unit for Tic-Tac-Toe to affect, and of course they are actually in the DLC, so it's kind of, you have to buy that in order to get the most use out of this. Can't fault CA too much for that, because after all, they are trying to make money here. But the Doomsayer update is the free patch that's coming, so Bretonnia has been reworked, Lord Croak now exists, and he just exists as part of the update, the Skaven Under Empire, which affects all Skaven, and of course, a bunch of general balance changes, many of which are going to be very, very interesting in multiplayer. AI vampire counts factions can now gain bloodline lords, with specializations for some factions. So this is interesting, and this is very characterful. So Mousillon will focus on Mousillon, I guess. I don't know. I can't pronounce French. I'm sorry. Focus on Blood Dragon Lords, the Necroc Brotherhood on, obviously, Necroc Lords, the Strigos Empire on the Strigoi, and the Silver Host on the female Lamian Lords. So that's very characterful for the campaign. That's pretty cool. More island map variations. Love that. New ritual currency locations. So the Eye of the Vortex campaign is about to get a little bit better. And a location map button on the Lord selection screen. That's all cool. Lowered the availability of most agents for all factions to tier 3 or below. So you can now get agents more agents earlier in the campaign, although it says capacity remains unaffected. And Feral Cold Ones are now added as a recruitable unit for all Lizardmen. Fun fact, I've never played a Lizardman campaign. I didn't realize, but Feral Cold Ones are not actually recruitable, despite the fact that they're usable in multiplayer. Before, it used to be the only way you got them was from the right that gave all of your armies an army ability that spawned them. So glad to see that those are recruitable now, because they are actually kind of neat, especially now that Rampage has been changed. Lots and lots of campaign changes. Removed auto-resolve bonuses for playable and horde factions controlled by the AI. So that's very interesting. CA, the Total War games have always given the AI a bonus in auto-resolve for a long time, just kind of to disincentivize the player from auto-resolving every battle, or like the goal being that an average player should always be able to achieve a better result than the auto-resolve, which makes sense, but of course leads to its own weird imbalances where like you end up having to fight battles depending on the auto-resolve, even if they're actually incredibly one-sided, because the auto-resolve doesn't take certain units into account properly. So I'll be interested to see where this goes. Kind of cautiously optimistic about it right now. These are all AI improvements, which is great. I love AI improvements. Reworked occupation option selection for Vampire Coast factions. So the Vampire Coast will now not just conquer everything in the way that they previously were. You used to see vampire pirates all over the shop, which is a little bit of a problem. No longer build multiple surplus buildings. Okay, so lots and lots of AI improvements. Great. And unit recruitment templates upgraded across the board, so you might see more interesting armies in the campaign. All that is fun. I love it. I'm definitely going to be playing campaign. I'm going to be running an Ikit Claw campaign, as I mentioned. I think I'll be streaming that tomorrow, which is when the actual DLC drops. So we'll see how we go. We've got the Skaven Under Empire, which we'll be showing off then. Fantastic. It looks amazing. Building changes. So the Warp Fire Thrower Weapons Team's secondary building unlock requirement used engineering level 1 rather than level 2. Moved Croxagores, Pterodons. Removed secondary building requirements. Moved Revive Crystals, Solar Engines. crystal engines, feral cold ones, etc. Lots of provinces added, so new regions added to existing and new provinces. So the map has expanded for both Eye of Vortex and Mortal Empires. That's really cool. So we've got 2 new regions in Ostermark, including Mordheim, City of the Damned. 2 new regions in Talabekland, a new massive Oracle, a new province, which it looks like just 1 region, or they might have moved something else to Massive Oracle. Western Jungles, new province. Got a new region in the Jungles of Green Mist and a mountain pass. And various character skill revisions. All that's really cool. The thing that I'm most interested in, though, of course, is the unit balance changes. So these are all, this is the Bretonnia rework, and the Bretonnia rework looks really, really neat. So there's a new vows system. The skills have been removed. Instead, they've been replaced with, that's all technologies. Where are the, I guess they don't tell us what the new vow system is. That's a little bit irritating. Come on, guys. Where are the vows? Okay, so there's a lot of new Bretonnian techs, a lot of new recruitment changes. So they've removed secondary building requirements from all Bretonnian units. So all of these units now no longer have secondary building requirements. That's actually very nice. I like streamlining that. So you don't have to be constantly building cross buildings and doing a lot of tedious Empire micromanagement in order to get your units. Lots of research time reduced. And an added +10 peasant economy cap bonus. Peasant mobs are free when you're not over your peasant economy cap, so that's nice. It means your chaff doesn't cost you money when you're not to maintain, as long as you're not drawing too many away from the field. New Confederation dilemmas, which is pretty cool. The Green Knight changes. This is very, very interesting. So you now have unlimited charges of the Green Knight when you're at level 5 Chivalry. The Green Knight is available for more turns, so they're available for longer, and they've removed all standard campaign agent skills from the Green Knight. He's immune to assassins, so he can't do anything except fight or search ruins, but he can't be assassinated, and you can get him over and over and over again as long as you're very chivalrous, which makes sense for Bretonnia. All your Bretonnian lords start on a horse by default, which is pretty neat. Improved garrisons. This, by the way, is actually pretty major. Apparently, Bretonnian garrisons have been mondo buffed, which is good because before they were very sad. Even greater differentiation between economy types. Interesting, interesting, interesting. And then, I love the audio. Rattling gunners will sometimes be overcome with verminous glee when firing. Ranged units play group idle vocalizations. New active casting system for the Screaming Bell, Ark of Sotek, and Engine of the Gods, changing the audio while that unit is casting a spell. And the Screaming Bell now actually makes bell noises instead of just clonking dully, which is great. New melee impact sounds for two-handed hammers / maces. Excellent. You've gotta love. We want those meaty thuds. I mean, honestly, like, look, I play this game for the spectacle. I don't play this game for the the tightly balanced esports experience. So definitely loud, meaty thuds for two-handed hammers and maces. Fantastic. Spell and unit balancing. This is the stuff that's really fascinating to me since I mostly play multiplayer. I do play campaign some, of course, but mainly multiplayer is what interests me. So, rebalanced all vortex breath. Rebalanced all bread abilities. Yeah, that's right. That's the one, General. Rebalanced all vortex, breath, wind, and explosion abilities as a bug was making them use a reduced radius for area of effect. So that is going to change some things. This game has always kind of had this tension between, like, the strengths of blobbing and the counters that are supposed to prevent blobbing from happening. Vortexes, breath spells, explosion abilities, all of these things are basically counter blob abilities. And apparently they weren't working as well as they were supposed to. So hopefully, if this bug is significant and has been fixed, then we may see a lot of very severe discouragement of blobs. Now, obviously, the most dangerous blobs in the game are single entity monsters. Like, if you have 3 or 4 single entity monsters in a small area, that can be very, very difficult to deal with. And vortexes and such don't affect single entity monsters all that much, but, you know, a man can hope. Summoning changes. This is big. Summoned units are no longer unbreakable. Undead summons now also crumble. They adjusted the power cost and redesigned unbinding to apply for a set duration. So these are the unbinding times, and if they've changed the power costs the new costs. So what this means is your summons will just disappear after a certain period of time, regardless of what their HP is, as well as being affected normally by leadership. So Manticores last a minute and a half, Vargulfs only last 77 seconds, but cost the same power, because they're more powerful than Manticores. The Realm of Souls, so the Ushabti summon lasts a minute and a half, the Drowned Dead last about a minute and a half, as does Captain Broth's Moondial. The upgraded Drowned Dead, interestingly, lasts longer. I say interestingly because, to be honest, that's the one I always used anyway. To my thinking, that was by far the more powerful use of the spell, was to cast it upgraded and get the guns. So it's funny that those actually last longer, but okay. Savage Dominion, so the Cygor lasts 101 seconds. That might be a little bit too short for the Cygor, I'm not sure. But Cygors are an artillery unit, and they rely on being around for a while to get their value. Funnily enough, the longest one now is actually the spiders that are summoned by the Arachnarok Queen, who last 3 minutes, which is something like half again as long as anyone else. That's funny. That really is funny. Also funny, Raised Dead, 134 seconds for over 2 minutes for zombies, but only 80 seconds for skeleton warriors. Now, as far as I know, Raised Dead was never really cast upgraded anyway, because the skeleton warriors have less HP than zombies, and you use this spell to either muck up enemy archers or to provide a body block. So HP is all you really want. But now, in addition, the standard Raised Dead just by default lasts a lot longer, almost twice as much. So, not sure what the logic behind that is, but okay, so at least there's a time limit. I mean, before, you could have a unit of zombies that was summoned lasting like 3 minutes sometimes. Vermintide, Menace Below, and Pestilent Birth all have very low limits, like comparatively speaking. They're shorter than almost anything else, which is a little bit disappointing, to be honest. But okay, I guess. Rats Emerged up to 99 seconds, so that's what happens if the Hellpit Abomination dies. Lord of Undeath, I believe, if I recall correctly, that is the summon of Krell, the special hero. And Command the Unliving is Ghouls. So Ghouls are 85 seconds, 77 seconds. So summons have been radically rebalanced. Strict caps on the length of time they exist as opposed to the unbinding mechanic beforehand. Looks interesting. I look forward to seeing how it plays out. I don't really know. I don't really have something to say about the overall balance here, except to say that I think this is still quite powerful. This is still quite powerful. These look like they're actually going to be very weak overall, which is a little bit disappointing. I didn't think that Skaven summons were oppressively powerful anyway, certainly not compared to the undead summons. So we'll see how that goes. Feral Cold ones are 80 seconds, also interestingly. So, in terms of unit rebalancing, Dark Elves got buffs to their monsters, so plus 10 armor to their big monsters. Small nerfs to their Cold One cavalry, so the Knights of the Ebon Claw, the Cold One Knights, the Cold One Dread Knights, and the Cold One Chariot. This is because of the Rampage change. We'll talk about that in a little bit here. Rampage was altered and made much, much less impactful, since Rampage was one of the things that kind of held the cost down of Cold One units, including the Dark Elf units. They've suffered a minor nerf now in exchange for having the much, much better version of Rampage. Or Primal Instincts, I believe is what it is on the Cold Ones. It's the yellow Rampage as opposed to the red Rampage. And basically now when that goes off at 25% health instead of 50%, and it gives you actually a charge bonus and melee attack buff when it activates. So it makes you more powerful in exchange for making you lose control. So much, much better for these Cold One units. Assassins finally have Vanguard deployment. Fantastic. Also, Khainite Assassins now have poison on their missiles, which is pretty neat. And Blackheart Corsairs got +1 bonus versus infantry, but it doesn't matter all that much. High Elves. This is actually pretty cool. Minus 150 cost. That's fairly major. That's over a 10% discount, like a 15% discount, I think, for a base Loremaster of Hoeth. Pretty solid. You didn't really see Loremasters all that much, and that might really help them. Noble Chariots got a nerf. Okay, that's fine. Moondragons got a little bit more armor. Alith Anar got better at the shooting, which is what he's designed to do, so glad to see him getting better at it. Swordmasters got +5 leadership. That's going to make them a little bit scarier, and they were already kind of scary. I don't think this fixes the actual problem with Swordmasters in multiplayer, the problem being that they get specifically targeted to be, you know, hosed by missile fire or artillery or spells or what have you. But it will mean that even after they've taken that damage on the way in, they will stick in melee for a little bit longer and get a little bit more damage done. So, not bad. Not sure if it will really make them meta, if it will really make them the go-to pick. I don't think it will, but it might make them more useful in marginal cases. Moondragons obviously got some more armor. Frostheart Phoenix lost a tiny bit of charge bonus, but gained a total of 40 damage, most of it armor piercing and +1 melee attack, so he hits a lot harder. Sundragon also got more armor. The base Illyrian Reavers, not the archers, but the basic ones, got -50 cost, and then the Loremaster of Hoeth got -150 cost again? Maybe they mean that it applies also in multiplayer. I think that's probably what they mean, which interestingly might mean that this Knights of the Ebon Claw -50 cost does not apply to multiplayer. Because you see here, -50 multiplayer cost for the Bolt Fiends, -50 multiplayer cost for the Loremaster. Illyrian Reavers just say -50 cost, and so do the Knights of the Ebon Claw. So those changes might not apply in multiplayer, I'm not certain. For the Empire, Volkmar the Grim got buffed, so he has more defense, more bonus versus infantry on his Pimp Chariot on the Volkswagen, and he is slightly cheaper on the Volkswagen. The Hellblaster Volley Gun is a little bit more accurate. Accusation got completely changed, so it's no longer a direct damage ability, which is good because that didn't make any damn sense. Instead, it's a pretty significant hex. So it sunders armor, effectively. It reduces armor by 30, reduces melee defense and missile resistance for 35 seconds. So basically, Witch Hunters are now support snipers. The Witch Hunter drops the accusation on somebody, and then your Flying Goon Squad and Karl Franz or what have you all dogpile that person in an effort to kill them before that wears off. While their armor is lower, their melee defense is low, so you're going to be beating the hell out of them with your, you know, Griffin, your Empire Captain, your Halberd Demigriffs, whatever. You just dogpile on them. So that could be very, very effective. But, I mean, this, in some ways, this is actually a buff, because instead of dealing straight damage, it enables you to deal a lot more damage when you attack. But it's going to require a lot more skill to actually do. So it's bad for me, but for really good Empire players, it could be actually an increase in the value of Witch Hunters. And Steam Tanks got slightly more melee attack, which is fine. Now this is really interesting. And as a Greenskin player, I'm looking at this as like the dark horse come from behind surprise change of this patch. First of all, Wyverns apparently fixed a bug in their melee attack interval, so they might actually fight in melee, which could make Azag much more capable of defending himself in the air against flying goons. Potentially. That could be useful. We don't know how useful it is until we get to actually try it out tomorrow. Grimboar and Scarsnake both got plus 400 health. That's fine. It doesn't fundamentally fix the problem of having low mobility footlords without a whole lot of utility abilities, but it's something. It moves them kind of in the right direction. Giants got very slightly faster. Same thing. It moves them very slightly in the right direction, but doesn't fundamentally fix the problems. These are huge. These are huge. The Doom Diver went back to being primarily armor piercing, which, if I recall, it was in Warhammer 1. And that's a big-ass change. I mean, that's, like, their total projectile damage is not much more than this. I don't recall exactly what it is at the moment. I don't have numbers at the top of my head. But it's not all that much more. 115 AP projectile damage is a big swap. And they also gained +1 total damage from what they had before. So, I'm sorry, +10 total damage. I said +1, and because I'm losing my mind, apparently. So, that's a big deal. Their total damage, I've actually pulled up the Total War stats on my other monitor here, and I'm checking what their missile damage was. Yeah, so before, their missile base damage was 175, and their AP damage was 65. Now, their AP damage is going to be 180, and their base damage is going to be 70. So, now that is not their explosion damage, so this is not going to be effective against infantry. What this is going to do is make Doom Divers very, very effective at killing large armored monsters, because every time they hit, and they'll usually hit large armored monsters, and then every time they hit, they'll deal that 180 armor-piercing damage, which is very, very significant. On top of that, the Arachnarok Spider, and I presume they meant the Arachnarok Queen here, I don't think Venom Queen is the proper name, actually, but in any case, the Arachnarok Spider and the Regiment of Renown Arachnarok Spider both got plus 14 versus large. And plus 14 versus large is once again a big swing. Like, these are very, very significant balance changes for the greenskins. For reference, if you have the, if you look at the Arachnarok Spider previous to this change, the Arachnarok Spider's melee attack is 54, and their weapon strength is 380. So against a large target, their melee attack has now gone up to 68, which means they're going to be hitting most large monsters most of the time. And the plus 14 damage doesn't really matter for them, hardly at all. But that bonus versus large has now made them very, very effective at killing enemy monsters. And they were already not bad at that because they have high armor piercing damage and lots of armor themselves, and they have poison, which debuffs the stats of the enemy. So this has all of a sudden given greenskins what I think will end up being quite an effective counterplay against large armored monsters, which up until now they have been struggling for, just really, really struggling. Like Tomb Kings, Lizardmen, there's a variety of factions that can just really abuse the greenskins' weakness to large armored terror-causing monsters. And these two changes, I think, have gone a long way towards making the greenskins more effective against specifically those kinds of problems. I'll be fascinated to see how this ends up working. The dwarves, I think overall this was kind of a wash for the dwarves. So Belegar got plus 400 health, Thorgrim got a variety of buffs, extra melee attack, health, AP melee damage, regular melee damage, armor. Thorgrim's now really, really kind of a tank. Ungrim got plus 400 health, plus 4 melee defense, but once again, all of these things don't solve the fundamental problem. Creative Assembly has created a class of lords that don't matter, is basically my theory here. Or at least they matter a lot less than other kinds of lords. So if you have the option of getting a foot melee lord without any spells or anything, or any other kind of lord, the other kind of lord is always better value because they can actually affect the battle. Whereas if you see Belegar or Ungrim on the battlefield, you can just not fight him. Or like if he's in a blob, you can punt him out of that blob with a charging monster or something, and let him spend his time picking himself up off the ground, waddling back into the fight, and then you do it again and punt him. And he spends half the time flying and a third of his time picking himself up, and maybe 10 or 15% actually swinging his weapon. So, like, yes, buffs to Footlords are fine. I don't think these are the kinds of buffs that Footlords actually need. I think the kinds of buffs that Footlords actually need are new utility abilities, ranged abilities, or like AoEs around them, auras that buff their troops or debuff the enemy troops. Basically, things that make the enemy have to account for the presence of the Lord on the field, as opposed to just going around them. Grombrindal got cheaper, but the Rune Lord got more expensive, and the Rune Lord was really the most competitive Dwarf Lord in the first place, so not sure about that. Hammers and Peakgate Guard got a tiny little token buffed melee defense. Brimstone Gun Gyrocopters got probably a lot better. Plus 15 total damage. It says slight accuracy increased. We'll see how much that does. And then Giant Slayers got slightly cheaper, which is all to the good. Vampire Coast got nerfed. A lot of people were calling for Coast nerfs. Coast has been overperforming, to be honest. Just because they have the advantages of the vampire counts as well as guns. So they're kind of like a bastardization of the vampire counts and the Empire, except their guns actually end up being better than the Empire's because they're unbreakable, being undead. So, it was causing a little bit of an issue. They've nerfed Count Noctilus on foot slightly. These nerfs don't matter too much, but they will make it slightly easier to kill him in those Count Noctilus versus the world situations that he tends to get into. Morgul's have been slightly nerfed, Night Terrors have been slightly nerfed, Morgul Haunters have been slightly nerfed. All that's fine, Morgul's were doing very well. I never had really good luck with them, but a lot of people who have played Vampire Coast at a high level indicated that if handled very well, they were very, very good. So, fine, nerf them slightly, let's see if that's enough. If not, we can always push on more. Zombie Gunnery Mobs lost health and melee defense. This is probably a good change, because the biggest thing about gunnery mobs was that unlike most other ranged units, you could hit them really hard and they would keep ticking, because they have pretty high health per entity, and they're unbreakable, so the damage doesn't really matter all that much. Hand cannons apparently were doing too well, so they've been nerfed again. That's funny. As I understand it, hand cannons since the last patch were doing pretty well against monsters and single entities, because at close range all of their projectiles go into the same target. So this might be aimed at reducing that. And then the Lamprey's Revenge gets plus 100 multiplayer cost. That's good, because they were crazy powerful. And then the Vampire Counts get entirely buffs. And I don't understand this. I mean, I anticipate that this was meant to, like, be compensation for summons getting nerfed, but let's be real. Nobody else here is getting compensated for summons being nerfed, and the Vampire Counts were already really overpowered. Like, the Vampire Counts and the Vampire Coast were definitely the top two factions in this last patch. The Vampire Coast is getting their summons nerfed, and they're also getting a bunch of their units nerfed. But the Vampire Counts are getting their summons nerfed, and then they're getting their units buffed? Why? I don't understand. So Vargeist and the Devils of Schwarzhafen are getting buffed in terms of melee damage and charge bonus. I think that barely matters. They weren't used all that much anyway, because they're very flimsy. Karen Wraiths are getting plus 2 melee attack. That's fine. Karen Wraiths were an underused unit. They're not very good. Zombies get minus 50 cost, which in my opinion is just silly. For one thing, the Vampire Counts can already spam zombies just by casting Raise Dead, and even though Raise Dead has now been nerfed in terms of duration, they can still do that. Nothing will stop them. And that now makes zombies cost 100, which is the same cost as, like, Bretonnian peasant mobs and is cheaper than Skaven slaves, when zombies are actually better than both those units, on account of being unbreakable and causing fear and having a lot more hit points. Which is like the important, the important characteristics of a cheap fodder unit are, A, it doesn't run away, and B, it has a lot of hit points, right? Those are the qualities that you want in your body blockers. They exist to absorb damage, and the longer they do it, and the more HP they have to do it with, the better they are. Well, zombies are already tops in both those categories, so now they get to be tops in both those categories while also being the same price or cheaper than other people's competitors, which seems fucking ridiculous, to be blunt. And then you have the Vargulf, and the Vargulf was already frankly abusive. It's a super powerful single entity with great animations, and it's fast, and it does a ton of damage, and now it does 30 more damage, because why not? So Vampire Counts, still definitely number one. Moving a little bit faster, because I've been doing this now for half an hour without really noticing. You can see how much I like this game. Tomb Kings, Hyro Titan got a little bit of a melee buff. I don't think that matters. Skeleton Chariots got a charge bonus, and the non-archer variant got slightly cheaper. This is cool. I think chariots are really fun. They don't get used, I think, as much as they deserve. They're hard to use. They are. But the Tomb Kings chariots specifically, I did a bunch of testing on this back in the day. The Tomb Kings chariots do the most damage out of any chariot unit in the game, although I suppose with the addition of Doomflayers that may have changed, but I don't think so, because they have the most models. So most chariot units have, on standard large settings, have 3 models. Some have, like, Goblin Wolf chariots have 6, I think. Yeah, have 6. Skeleton chariots and skeleton archer chariots have the most. I think they have 9, I want to say. Correct me in the comments if I'm wrong on that. I haven't seen them in a long time, because I haven't been playing multiplayer very significantly in a long time. But I think they have 9 models in their chariot unit. And that means that they get their charge bonus on each of those models, and they get impact damage off each of those models. So basically, when I did my testing, probably almost a year ago at this point, I tested Tomb King's skeleton chariots versus, like, Illyrian Reaver Tyrannoc chariots, and Ithielmar chariots, and Boar chariots, and Wolf chariots, and Marauder chariots. And the skeleton chariots hit by far the hardest out of all of them, but were also the most fragile and the likeliest to die. So now they hit even harder, but their likeliness to die is unchanged, which is fine, I think. Katep got cheaper on the Casket of Souls. Nekara Warriors got cheaper because they were almost never used. Carrion got more expensive because they were used all the time. Carrion were like Fellbats, but far more powerful for about the same cost. So now they're a little bit more expensive to account for that. Sepulchral Stalkers got a bigger bonus versus large because, once again, they're not used all that much. There are Necropolis Knights with halberds are more efficient anti-large, and some of the bigger monsters are much more efficient anti-large. So Sepulchral Stalkers weren't really seeing a whole lot of use. Casket of Souls got better explosion, which is good because it's very inaccurate. And the Bone Giant got a more powerful arrow. I'm not sure if this will change much for the Bone Giant, actually. It'll make it slightly better at counter-firing against other monstrous units. But I don't think it really affects anything else, because, I mean, the Bone Giant already hit so hard that if it hit cavalry or infantry, the arrow was just going to pass through him. So, I don't know. It'll be valuable in certain circumstances, especially shooting at, like, dragons or Durthu or other big lords with tons and tons of hit points and lots of abilities where you want to kill them just even a couple seconds faster will make a difference. Wood Elves. Treekin got slightly less tanky but more melee attacky, so more grindy. Glade Riders got cheaper, and then Glade Riders with Hagbane tips got a huge buff, actually. They lost 3 base damage, but they gained that same 3 in armor-piercing damage, and now their attacks are magical, which is a big deal. Magical attacks aren't always an unalloyed good, but they're usually a good thing. And a swap of 3 regular damage to 3 armor piercing damage is also a big deal. Before, their base damage was 18, their AP was 4. Now their base damage is going to be 15 and their AP 7, so their AP ratio has changed quite a bit. And on top of that, of course, they already caused poison. Now they're also magical damage, so they go right through physical resistance, which is going to make Grail Knights really, really sad. It's also going to make a variety of Skaven units very sad, because a bunch of Skaven units have physical resistance but not magical resistance. So the net result is, at least in a couple of matchups, Glade Riders with Hagbane tips are going to be, I think, the go-to. And the same is applied to Glade Guard. Glade Guard with Hagbane tips have that same change. ROR Wardens of Sithral got plus 50 cost, and Waywatchers got slightly slower on the reload. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to reduce the dominance of Waywatchers and replace them with Glade Riders and Glade Guard. What I think they've actually effectively done with this patch right here is make Wood Elves even more of a cavalry missile kiting faction than they already were, which is fine. I mean, that's what Wood Elves are kind of supposed to be. I'm not... we'll see. I don't play Wood Elves that much, so I don't know much about... I don't even play against Wood Elves all that much, so I'm preserving judgment here, but overall, this looks like a really big buff for Glade Riders. Very comparable to the buffs that some of those Greenskin units have gotten above. Lizardmen, so this is the Primal Instincts change I was talking about. So activation threshold reduced to 20% health. It also buffs charge bonus by 16% and melee attack plus 8. All of the Cold One Cavalry got a debuff to kind of mitigate that without changing their price. Kroq-Gar got a pretty significant bonus in that he got charge defense versus large and plus 8 bonus versus large. So attacking Kroq-Gar with monsters now going to be sort of dangerous. He also got that plus 8 bonus versus large when he's mounted on a cold or a horned one. So Kroq-Gar on a cold one or Kroq-Gar on a horned one might now be an interesting anti-monster hunter choice. And they increased the strength of the rocks that pterodons drop, which is great because those are hilarious. I love pterodons dropping rocks. I hate it when they drop them on me, but I just love the concept of these these pterodactyls just flying into combat, clutching a rock and hucking it on people. It's fantastic. It's exactly what I want from Total War Warhammer. Bretonnia, plus 3 charge bonus, plus 3 charge bonus for their flying units. Cheaper and slightly better men-at-arms with polearms, better beast slayers of Baston, and minus 100 cost for the companions of Kenel. This catches me by surprise. The companions were already a fantastic regiment of renown. Now it feels like they're going to be an auto pick, but I don't know. Overall, though, I think Bretonnia is really going to suffer in this patch, even with these buffs, because a lot of the matchups they already had trouble with are getting a lot harder. Like Lizardmen with the new DLC units going to be a lot harder for Bretonnia. Skaven going to be a lot harder for Bretonnia, and I think Skaven already had kind of the better of that matchup. Greenskins going to be a lot harder with anti-large spiders and armor-piercing, heat-seeking missiles on their Doom Divers. I think it's gonna be tough times to be a Bretonian knight. I tell you what. Skaven assassins now have Vanguard deployment, and they use the Assassin's Trophy instead of the trophy heads. That was always weird that the assassins had trophy heads. That said, using Assassin's Trophy instead of trophy heads is a very significant nerf because it's half as good. And then they got 50 cheaper, so Vanguard deployment is great, don't get me wrong. I've complained before about Assassins not having Vanguard deployment. This, I would prefer, honestly, that they had buffed Queek somehow, because Queek really could use the help. And Summon Plague Monks, they corrected entity health. I didn't know the entity health was different, so good for them. Warriors of Chaos, lots of minor buffs. The Marauder Horsemasters stole a couple of javelins from the Marauder Horsemen, it looks like, just to prove that they were better. I mean, I think this is probably some kind of hazing ritual. Chaos Spawn got +2 melee attack, Forsaken got +2 charge, Sigvald got extra melee attack, the Swords of Chaos got cheaper, which is nice because they were critically expensive, and the Giants got slightly faster, just like the greenskin ones. Norska, same javelin trade, Armored Skinwolves and the Maws of Savagery got cheaper, Feral Mammoths got more expensive, but the ones with the War Shrine got cheaper, which is interesting. I guess this makes it harder to bring like 3 mammoths in the same army. But making the better mammoth cheaper while the worse one gets more expensive, I don't know. I'd have to look at that in more detail. At first blush, it looks like not a whole lot of change for Norska. I mean, their Armored Skinwolves got slightly cheaper, and I think that's the biggest deal here. Beastmen, nothing changed. Like, really, this is just nothing changed. Chaos Spawn got slightly more accurate. Minotaurs got slightly more accurate. Giants got slightly faster. Nobody ever brought Giants anyway. Basic Minotaurs, their roll and the amount of damage they deal has not actually moved from +2 melee attack, and same thing for Chaos Spawn. In terms of abilities, all of the magic missiles got rebalanced in a pretty significant way. So Shem's Burning Gaze, generally speaking, what happened was explosion damage went up, armor piercing usually went down, and bonus versus large got removed. So Shem's Burning Gaze, +20 explosion, -5 AP explosion, -2 projectile damage, -7 bonus versus large per projectile. So against large units, actually what happened was the damage stayed the same, but it lost some armor piercing, because you get -7 bonus versus large, -2 damage for a total of -9, -5 armor piercing, total of -14, then +20 base damage, so total of +6 damage versus large targets, but they lost 5 AP. So overall, that would be a nerf against large targets. It would also be a nerf against armored non-large targets, against armored infantry. The +20 explosion damage could be useful, but to be honest, I find that small explosions often aren't very good. Just because formations get deranged, units spread out, explosions very often are just wasted unless they're a certain size. The upgraded Shem's Burning Gaze got more AP explosion damage, man, I can't say words, but also lost its bonus versus large. So what they're doing here is they're trying to turn magic missiles away from being an anti-large sniper tool and towards being something that you lob into big blocks of infantry in order to blow them up. Which is curious. I mean, they're trying to avoid the old Lord Sniping meta problem, but I don't know that this is the way to do it. Hand of the Gods, basically the same thing. It actually got exactly the same changes as Shem's Burning Gaze. Vindictive Glare got nerfed into the fucking ground. Vindictive Glare was quite powerful before, and it annoyed some people that it was so powerful, but look at this. -95 explosion damage. I didn't know Vindictive Glare had 95 explosion damage to take away. -15 armor-piercing projectile damage. Base missile damage has been set to 30, and it's lost all of its bonus versus large, and it had a massive bonus versus large. Power cost set to 4. So, on net, what's happened here is we've got 30 base missile damage. We've lost 15 armor-piercing missile damage. In terms of explosion, the explosion is now way weaker than it used to be, but it's majority AP. So there is that. So Vindictive Glare, well, they've changed Vindictive Glare to be something that you lob into a line of Longbeards, basically. This is now an anti-armored infantry spell, I think. I think it's also quite a bit weaker than it used to be. The upgraded version, same changes. I think the upgraded version of Vindictive Glare just gave you twice as many projectiles. So, okay, that's fine, I guess. I think this is back to being a garbage spell, to be honest. Looking at these changes, I think Vindictive Glare and Gaze of Mork, which got exactly the same changes, I think both of these spells are now back to being pretty much garbage, which is sad. I enjoy magic missiles being useful, but, you know, it's a real dangerous tightrope to walk between being useful and being radically overpowered, so I understand it. Gaze of Nagash didn't get hit quite so hard, particularly in that it actually gained bonus versus large. So plus 30 explosion, lost armor piercing. This is the opposite from the changes up above. Gained explosion damage, lost armor piercing, gained bonus versus large, and then lost some base projectile damage. So the Gaze of Nagash is actually being designed to be used against large targets, which is fascinating. And then the Comet of Casandora got a huge projectile damage buff, but it only applies to the actual comet, not the explosion. So that kind of sounds like they want you to drop the Comet of Casandora on single entity monsters, which is silly because single entity monsters will never hold still within that tiny little radius of the actual comet itself. But I guess if you dropped it in the middle of a blob of armored infantry of some kind, it would do some pretty decent work with. I mean, that much AP would absolutely wipe out whatever models it hit, unless they are a single entity monster. High King and Beloved Son of Bretonia got significantly buffed, so this is something that that Bretonia and Dwarf players have to be happy about, because it now works on units that are below 50% morale. So it works regardless what the morale of the target is. It used to only work on units that were not wavering or shaken. Now it works on everybody once they trigger, which is related to the morale or the HP of the King Luan, and Thorgrim, respectively. Queek's items got buffed. He's now even better at fighting in melee, which is fine, but not relevant. Slaughterer's Call got a melee attack buff to +9, so that's a nice push up for the Beastmen, I guess. This means to say Revenge. Revenge Incarnate removed max number of uses, removed leadership increase. So this is Belegar's special ability, which is a powerful self buff. So they've made it weaker, but they've also removed the limitation on the number of uses. So if you bring Belegar and you can keep him alive, he can now spam Revenge Incarnate throughout the entire match, which is kind of neat. I mean, I guess you don't stop being Revenge Incarnate just because you've used it 3 times or whatever. Von Horstmann's Speculum got smaller radius. This is the item that the base pirate lords have for the fleet admirals. Fleet admirals have this in the Vampire Coast. You never see fleet admirals anyway. Star of Avalorn, minus 10% less health healed per second. Great. Star of Avalorn sucked. And the dreaded 13th spell, the only change that matters, added plus 12 AP explosion damage and changed detonation speed. I don't know what that means. Hopefully they made it faster. And improved the targeting UI, so they will no longer hopefully come out in a different place from where you placed the template. But hopefully what this means is the dreaded 13th will actually delete units when you drop it on them, which is what it was always supposed to do. And then the Halberdiers, I mean, summoning Stormvermin Halberdiers is just kind of sad, especially because I've been asking around on Discord since I didn't see them listed in the unbinding times, and I was told it was like Vermintide. It's 67 seconds, which sucks. Stormvermin Halberds are designed to be a tanky unit that exists for a long time and gets value that way. If they can't exist for longer than 62 seconds, then they're worthless. But at least it might do a bunch more damage, which is great. Lots of bug fixes. Many of these are not really relevant to battles. Flagellant Swords of Chaos. Various bonuses are now being properly applied. Traits, targeted spells, and abilities are no longer cancelled when units rout off the battlefield. That's interesting. Does that mean... I'm not sure if that means spells and abilities targeted on the unit, or spells and abilities the unit is trying to use. In neither case does that actually seem to make sense to me, so I'm sure I'm reading it wrong somehow. Projectiles with a fuse should now detonate correctly on Hellfen battle map. Good. I'm glad. And various quests are triggered. Night Goblin's sphere chain is now properly connected. Okay, so all kinds of little things that we're not going to go over right now. But basically, in terms of multiplayer balance, I think the big winners here are the greenskins. Just because this is actually a big swing in utility. Plus 14 bonus versus large is super useful. Swapping Doomed Iris to be majority armor piercing and by a long shot is incredibly useful. This gives the greenskins the tools to fight against the things that have been abusing greenskin armies for probably 2 or 3 years at this point, since Total War Warhammer 1. I mean, very good greenskin players have always been able to kind of make it work. but it's been a super, super challenging experience. And this, I think, will really kind of change things a little bit. I would not be surprised to see a lot more double spider with a Doom Diver builds on ladder. It's because Doom Divers are accurate enough that, especially if you combine them with Effigy of Degit, you can actually hit flyers with them. And if you can hit flyers with them, before you could do that, but it wouldn't do a ton of damage to, like, Luan Liangke or, you know, dragons or what have you, because they have pretty significant armor. Well, now that will do a lot of damage. I mean, every time you hit a dragon with a Doom Diver projectile, it will take about 200 damage now. So that's a very significant change. And if that dragon lands on you, Arachnarok spiders now, I think, have the melee stats to go toe-to-toe with those large monsters, even if there's a lot of other fighting going on around them. This is going to shift the target profile for greenskins pretty significantly. I'll have to play around with it for a while, but it'll be very interesting to see. And of course, big winners in this patch are the Skaven and the Lizardmen, because their new units coming out in the DLC look very, very good. Been watching some more early access stuff and such. Of course, I'm not important enough to get early access, so I'm still back here with the peanut gallery, gritting my teeth, waiting for my turn. But the Skaven Jezzails and Rattling Guns are definitely going to make attacking a Skaven army much, much more dangerous, just because they are Jezzails so accurate and Rattling Guns so damaging. At close range, Rattling Guns just melt monsters, melt lords, melt cavalry, whatever it is, Rattling Guns will chew it to shreds. And at long range, Skaven Jezzails can do a very, very steady stream of damage, and there's not much that can be done about it unless you can get to the Jezzails and shut them down. Your only other alternative is pretty much staying outside of that 300 range window, which is hard to do, and really limits your impact on the battlefield if you have to stay that far away. So those two things in the Skaven roster are definitely going to shift the picture. The addition of Ikit Claw, the Warlock Master, and the Doom Flayers have given them a lot more tools to tie down enemy units, things that are tough to kill, that can last for a long time, even in hard fights. Kind of provided a lot more core to the Skaven army, along with, of course, the Regiments of Renown, specifically the Council Guard, which are unbreakable, and the Blight Scab's Plague Pack, which have an immune to psychology aura. All that stuff has really made the Skaven army, I think, a lot more resilient, or at least open up the option to be a lot more resilient if you're willing to pay for it. Now, the biggest limitation on the Skaven army is just going to be that all of these new tools, their new fun toys, they're all expensive. The cheapest new thing they've got is the Rattling Guns, and those are still 800, which is higher than average cost for a unit. So you're not going to be able to have tons of this stuff. Like, if you want, from what I've seen, if you want Ikit Claw on a Doom Wheel in your army, and he's really good, so you might as well, like, having him is a good choice, and you want a couple of Jezzails, then at that point, you don't have a ton of money left. I mean, 3 Jezzails are 2,700, which is a very, very heavy artillery commitment. I'm basically counting them as artillery. That's pretty much what they are. Ikit Claw is well over 2,000 on his Doom Wheel. So at this point, you're looking down the barrel of almost half of your funds being spent on 4 units as Skaven. So you can still take a full stack if you want, but that full stack is going to be mostly Skaven slaves. And so you kind of really have to make adjustments. You really have to be willing to sacrifice something out of that army in order to take the goodies, in order to get the tools that you want, the gun line, the Doom Wheels, what have you. You can have it, but you can't have it all at once. And then, of course, the Lizardmen. The Lizardmen got fast armor-piercing flanker units in their red-crested skinks. They got Ripperdactyls, which actually look amazing. Ripperdactyls, regardless of what their stats seem to say, Ripperdactyls have fantastic animations, and they have primarily armor-piercing damage. Plus, they cause at least fear, I think, possibly terror, at least fear. So they're very, very good flankers, very, very good backline attackers, and they're excellent at fighting in the air, because they're multiple model units with relatively high HP and high damage that can surround dragons, terrorgeists, that kind of thing, and just rip them to shreds without too much trouble. So the Lizardmen are much more competitive in the air. They've got their own, all of their Regiments of Renown. They have the ability to stack resistances now to form just a blob of death. They have Lord Croak with his Explode Armies spell, which is hilarious to watch. Probably not actually going to be super efficient in multiplayer just because it has a really, really long charge up time, and you can dodge it if you're paying any attention, unless you're actually stuck in melee. Now, of course, it doesn't cause friendly fire, so I would anticipate the usual use case for a Lizardman player is going to be to stick you in melee with Saurus or something, and then drop it, blow a hole in your front line, and have those units that used to be fighting you just rampage on through. And I think that's going to be a nightmare to fight. But in general, Lizardmen have gotten a lot more great tools. They've got Tenenwan, who is a beast caster who can mount a giant dinosaur, as if they didn't already have enough of those. and all kinds of very interesting tools. They got the Salamanders. Salamanders look cool. I'm not sure how powerful they really are, but they definitely look cool. And I mean, fast flanking cavalry that can spit fireballs are never a bad thing, especially because those fireballs are primarily AP and have an anti-large bonus. So I think Salamanders are basically going to shit all over most people's flanking cavalry if they're supported even a little bit. And basically, I think what the Lizardmen have gotten is they've gotten the tools to make a blob very, very dangerous, and then they've gotten the tools to stop you from avoiding the blob. The Ripperdactyls, the Salamanders, the Ancient Salamanders, Pupapak's cohort, the Coldwind Spear Rider, RORs, all of these units are designed to stop your flankers, to prevent you from going where you want to go, to force you to engage with the blob of dinosaurs, with all of the auras, with the AoE damage effects, with the ward saves, etc., to force you to fight that and get ground underneath by it. So it's going to be interesting to see how that changes things. But in any case, this has gone on long enough. Stick around. Tomorrow we will be streaming Total War Warhammer 2. I think we'll be playing Ikit campaign. I think Mortal Empire's Ikit Claw will be the thing to do. We're just going to have to put up with long turn load times, because that's how Mortal Empires is. I mean, even on... if you watched CA's streams, even on their top-of-the-line computers, turn times are well over a minute. For the Mortal Empires, even for the Vortex, their turn times were over a minute at the TwitchCon. On my computer, turn times for Mortal Empires are going to be more like 1.5 minutes or 2 minutes, and that's just going to have to be what it is. But I'll look forward to doing it, look forward to seeing you there. Stay tuned. This is going to be exciting. I really look forward to seeing how things are going to change in this game in the future. It's tons of fun, and it's only getting better. So, thanks for watching. See you tomorrow.